September 29, 1957. It was a Sunday afternoon in the Ural Mountains. Villagers in the Chelyabinsk region of the Soviet Union went about their lives. They tended their gardens. They watched their children play in the dusty streets. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the rolling hills and dense birch forests. Until, well, it wasn't. A strange light appeared on the horizon, a soft, ethereal glow that painted the underside of the clouds a pale blue. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Some thought it was the northern lights. Others whispered of strange weather phenomena or maybe a new kind of lightning. To understand the disaster, one must first understand the place where it happened. Chelyabinsk 40 was not a city in the traditional sense. It was a ghost on the map, a closed administrative territorial entity. One of 10 secret cities that formed the backbone of the Soviet nuclear program, the Mayak Production Association, the industrial plant at its core. This was the heart of the Soviet nuclear weapons program, but their frantic race for nuclear supremacy had come at a catastrophic cost. The blue light was the spectral signature of a massive chemical explosion in a nuclear waste storage tank. Highly radioactive liquid waste, a byproduct of plutonium processing, was handled with shocking negligence. For years, the most dangerous waste was dumped into the Teka River. The river glowed. Downstream villagers used its water for drinking, bathing, irrigating their crops. By the mid-1950s, waste was stored in large underground steel tanks encased in concrete. Each tank held tens of thousands of gallons of a hot, bubbling stew. But the cooling systems were flawed and inadequate. They saw the temperature gauges rising. They saw the warning signs. Yet production continued. The tanks were a ticking time bomb, waiting for the inevitable moment when chemistry and physics would render their final, terrible judgment. The moment came at 4:22 p.m. on September 29, 1957. Inside tank number 14 of the Mayak waste storage facility, a faulty cooling system had failed. For months, a volatile cocktail of nitrate and acetate salts had been steadily heating up. The water evaporated, concentrating the waste into a dry, crystalline cake. A spark, perhaps from a faulty instrument, ignited the nitrate salts. The result was a massive chemical explosion, not a nuclear detonation. The blast blew apart the 160-ton concrete lid of the storage tank and hurled it aside as if it were a pebble. A column of smoke and radioactive particles shot a mile into the sky. It was this cloud of energized particles, glowing with the eerie light of ionized air, that people saw for miles around. The blast released an estimated 20 million curies of radioactivity into the environment, nearly half of what Chernobyl later released. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Plant workers and soldiers, with little or no protective equipment, were thrown into a radioactive inferno. They moved through clouds of invisible poison. The true danger was in the plume, laden with deadly isotopes like strontium 90 and cesium 137. The plume stretched over 300 kilometers and blanketed fields, grain, cattle, lakes, and homes with a fine layer of radioactive dust. In the face of this unprecedented catastrophe, the Soviet state did what it did best. It lied. It covered up. It built a wall of silence around the disaster, determined to prevent any news from reaching its own citizens or the outside world. Teams in protective gear measured and recorded and left. They told the villagers nothing. The silence bred rumor, fear, and profound uncertainty. It was more terrifying than any alarm. Within a week or 10 days, the first evacuations began, selective and haphazard. Residents were given just hours to gather what they could carry. Their houses were bulldozed and buried in an attempt to literally erase the villages from the map. The state was not just covering up a disaster, it was trying to expunge it from history. For those in lower contamination areas, there was no evacuation. Instead, a grotesque experiment. Farmers were ordered to plow and harvest radioactive crops. Tainted meat was mixed with clean meat and distributed across the Soviet Union in small, untraceable quantities. The human cost of the state's secrecy was, honestly, just immeasurable. It was paid by ordinary people who had no say. Take the Tatars of Muslyumovo. They sat on the banks of the contaminated Techa River and were exposed for years. They drank poisoned water. They ate poisoned food. The health consequences were devastating and insidious. Chronic fatigue, nausea, persistent headaches. Immune systems collapsed. Cancer rates, especially leukemia, skyrocketed. Birth defects and genetic abnormalities became tragically common. Doctors were forbidden from diagnosing radiation sickness. They used vague labels instead. Victims were sick and dying, but denied the truth. The psychological torment matched the radiation's damage. Distrust and abandonment. Whispers from the poisoned land persisted. Families passed down stories of a strange light, of gray dust, of buried villages and forbidden zones ringed with barbed wire. Fragmented, suppressed stories kept memory alive in the shadows. When comparing Kishtim to Chernobyl or Fukushima, its most striking feature is obscurity. Chernobyl and Fukushima were global events. Kishtim happened in secret. Chernobyl's cloud drifted across Europe. It could not be hidden. Kishtim occurred deep within a closed state and was contained within Soviet borders. While Chernobyl released more radiation overall, the Kishtim plume was concentrated with long-lasting isotopes like strontium-90 that mimic calcium and settle in bones. The East Ural radioactive trace produced some of the highest long-term doses ever received by a civilian population and created a permanent exclusion zone. Nature reclaimed the land, yes, but it did so as a mutated radioactive wilderness, a poisoned sanctuary where human settlement is forbidden. The contamination began long before 1957 and continues to this day. Kishtim is a slow, grinding process of contamination. It is not a single fiery moment, but a long burn that poisoned land and people in secret. For decades, Kishtim remained a rumor, a ghost story whispered among intelligence agencies and dissident scientists. The first major crack came in 1976 when Zoris Medvedev published an article piecing together Soviet radio ecology reports. American and European scientists noted elevated strontium-90 in the atmosphere but could not pinpoint the source. Many assumed weapons testing. The cover-up held. The Iron Curtain and state censorship kept the truth hidden for decades. Official confirmation did not come until 1989. 32 years after the event, after Chernobyl forced new openness, international scientists and journalists were finally allowed in and found evidence confirming the worst rumors. Kishtim became a case study in the catastrophic consequences of prioritizing production over safety and the dangers of inadequate waste management. Problems that still plague the nuclear industry. Remembering disasters like Kishtim is not an academic exercise. It is a moral imperative. When we forget, we risk repeating the same mistakes. The story of Mayak warns that technological progress can have a dark side. Strontium-90 lodged in bones, half-life about 29 years. Cesium, 137 in soil, half-life about 30 years. The poison of 1957 remains. Remembering validates and honors resilience. It keeps victims from being mere footnotes. These stories keep power in check and demand accountability. The Soviet authorities tried to bury the catastrophe. They were wrong. Remembering is a form of justice. It honors the living and the dead. No disaster should be forgotten. Share it. Talk about it. Our attention and discussion are the antidote to that silence. The tale of Kishtim is a pressing lesson for our time. We live in an age of complex technologies, AI, genetic engineering, that hold promise and peril. The rush for supremacy, cutting corners, and the temptation of secrecy are still with us. Kishtim warns of catastrophic hubris. By sharing these histories, we build vigilance. Each telling chips away at the wall of silence. Think about the villagers who looked up at that beautiful, terrible blue light. Their legacy depends on us. Do not let this story fade back into the shadows. Study it, debate it, demand accountability. History is watching, and it will judge us by what we choose to remember. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more deep historical investigations like this video and share it so others remember too.